Some mornings just feel perfect, holding my baby, watching my husband smile like everything's finally settled. But have you ever noticed how something small can feel just slightly off?
The morning light spilled softly across the kitchen floor as I stood barefoot, gently rocking my baby against my chest. He was half asleep, his tiny fingers curled into my shirt, and for a moment, everything felt still. Safe. My husband Daniel leaned in the doorway watching us, smiling like this quiet little life we built was all he ever wanted. We lived in his family's house just outside the city, big, polished, never quite feeling like mine, but it was home. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Daniel kissed my forehead before heading out, promising he'd be back before dinner. "Everything's taken care of," he said, like he always did. I believed him, but as the front door closed, his mother's voice echoed faintly from the hallway behind me, sharp, controlled, and just low enough to make me wonder if I wasn't meant to hear it. And for the first time that morning, something didn't feel right. Margaret stepped into the kitchen a second later, already dressed, already composed in that effortless way she carried herself, like the house adjusted to her, not the other way around. Her eyes flicked to me, then to the baby in my arms, and something unreadable passed across her face before it settled into a polite smile. "You should put him down," she said lightly. "You'll spoil him if you hold him too much." I smiled back, out of habit more than agreement. "He's only 6 months. That's when habits start," she replied, pouring herself coffee without asking if I wanted any. It wasn't new. None of it was new. The small comments, the quiet corrections, the way she spoke like she was guiding me through a role I hadn't quite mastered yet. I had learned to let most of it slide, especially for Daniel. He always said she meant well, that this was just how she was. And most days I could believe that. I shifted the baby against my shoulder, feeling his slow, steady breathing, grounding myself in it. This right here was what mattered. Not the house, not the tension I couldn't quite name. Just us. Margaret moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency, but her attention kept drifting back to me. Or maybe to him. It was hard to tell. Daniel mentioned he's been handling some paperwork, she said casually, like it had just crossed her mind. Important things. You don't need to concern yourself with it. I hesitated, just for a second. He said he'd go over it with me. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Daniel has a lot on his plate. It's better if he focuses on what matters. My grip on my baby tightened slightly. I am what matters. Margaret didn't respond right away. She just took a slow sip of her coffee, her eyes steady on me over the rim of the cup. Then, calmly, "Of course," she said. But it didn't feel like agreement. The room seemed quieter after that. Too quiet. Even the soft hum of the refrigerator felt louder, like it was filling a space neither of us wanted to acknowledge. I turned toward the window, watching the empty driveway where Daniel's car had been just minutes ago. He always told me everything was handled, everything was secure. And I had trusted that. Trusted him. Behind me, I heard Margaret's voice again, softer this time, almost to herself. "Blood matters more than promises," she murmured. I turned, but she was already walking out of the kitchen. And standing there alone, holding my son just a little tighter, I felt it. Something subtle. Something shifting beneath the surface of everything I thought I understood. By nightfall, that feeling would have a reason. The call didn't feel real at first. It came just after noon, while I was in the living room folding tiny clothes into neat, careful stacks. My phone buzzed against the table, an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer. "Is this Cynthia Forbes?" A man's voice asked, flat and professional. Yes, there was a pause, just long enough for something cold to settle in my chest. "I'm calling about your husband." The rest of his words blurred together. Accident, critical, didn't make it. Each phrase felt disconnected, like they belonged to someone else's life. I remember saying no at least 3 times, like repetition could undo what I was hearing. By the time I hung up, my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. Margaret was already there within the hour. She didn't cry. Not in front of me. She moved through the house like she had a list, calls to make, arrangements to set, people to notify. Others followed soon after. Daniel's father, his brother. Voices filled the space, low and controlled. I stood in the middle of it, holding my baby, waiting for someone to explain what was happening, really explain it. But no one did. Every time I tried to ask a question, I was met with the same calm response. For handling it. At first, I was grateful. I didn't have the strength to think, let alone decide anything. But by that evening, I noticed something. They weren't asking me anything at all, and somehow everything was already being decided without me. 3 days after the funeral, they made their move. I hadn't slept properly since the call. The house felt different, too quiet in some places, too crowded in others. People came and went, offering condolences that barely registered. Through it all, Margaret remained steady, composed, always one step ahead of everything. That morning, I took my baby out for a short walk, just 10 minutes. I needed air, something that didn't feel like grief pressing in from every wall. When I came back, I knew something was wrong before I even reached the door. My key didn't work. I tried again, slower this time, my hands already starting to shake. Locked. And then I saw them. 2 suitcases sitting neatly on the porch. Mine.
Wait, she just stepped out for a minute and now her key doesn't work and her bags are outside. That feels planned, doesn't it?
The door opened before I could knock. Margaret stood there, flanked by Daniel's father and his brother. No softness, no sympathy, just a kind of cold finality. What is this? My voice didn't sound like my own. Margaret didn't step aside. "Cynthia, it's best if you don't make this harder than it needs to be." My heart dropped. "Where's my son?" "He's inside. He'll be staying with us." The words didn't make sense. "What?" Daniel's brother stepped forward, holding a folder. "There are documents," he said. Daniel made arrangements. I stared at him. That's not possible. Margaret's expression didn't change. "You were never meant to stay." And before I could even move past them, the door closed, with my baby still on the other side. I didn't even have time to grieve. I had to fight. The first night without my son felt unreal. I sat in my car outside a friend's apartment, staring at my phone, replaying everything over and over like there had to be a version of it that made sense. But there wasn't. Every path led back to the same door, slamming shut in my face. The next morning, I went straight to a lawyer. I told him everything, Daniel, the house, the documents, what they said about custody. He listened carefully, but I could see it in his expression. Hesitation. "If those papers are valid," he said slowly, "this could be complicated." Complicated. Like I wasn't talking about my child. Within days, I was buried in a system that didn't feel built for someone like me. Every form, every call, every question seemed to circle back to one thing: I had no proof. No access. No control. And they had everything. Margaret's name carried weight. Their lawyers moved quickly, too quickly. It was like they'd been ready for this. But then, something shifted. My lawyer called me late one evening, his tone different this time, sharper. "There are inconsistencies," he said. "Dates that don't line up. Signatures that don't quite match." My grip tightened on the phone. Pause. "It means," he said carefully. This may not just be about custody. And for the first time since Daniel died, a darker thought took hold. What if none of this was an accident? The courtroom felt colder than anywhere I'd ever been. I sat at the front, hands clenched in my lap, staring straight ahead while Daniel's family took their seats across from me. Margaret looked the same as always, composed, controlled, untouched by everything that had happened. If someone didn't know the story, they'd think she belonged there more than I did. For a moment, I almost believed it myself. And the evidence started. My lawyer stood, calm but precise, laying everything out, piece by piece. The documents they had used to take my son, the ones I had been told were Daniel's wishes, were pulled apart under scrutiny. Dates first. The signatures were supposedly made days before Daniel died. But metadata from the printing company told a different story. The files hadn't even existed until after the day of his death. A ripple went through the courtroom. Then the signatures themselves. A forensic analyst explained it clearly, too clearly to argue with. The pen pressure was inconsistent. The stroke patterns didn't match Daniel's known handwriting. They weren't just questionable. They were forged. I didn't look at Margaret until that moment. When I did, her expression had changed, just slightly. The confidence was still there, but something underneath it had cracked. And then came the reason. Daniel's estate, everything he owned, everything his family controlled, was tied to one condition: it would pass through our child. Not me. Never me. Control of my son meant control of everything Daniel left behind. And I was in the way. The final blow came quietly. My lawyer presented emails, recovered, time-stamped, showing Daniel had been planning to transfer legal protections to me. Full parental and financial security. The paperwork he kept mentioning, it would have secured us. He just hadn't finished it in time. The silence in the room felt heavier than anything I'd carried before. The ruling didn't take long after that. Full custody was returned to me. The documents were declared fraudulent. An investigation into Margaret and the others was formally opened. But none of that mattered in the moment they placed my son back in my arms. He cried at first, confused, overwhelmed. And I held him tighter than I ever had, like if I loosened my grip even slightly, someone might try to take him again. When I walked out of that courtroom, everything had changed. The house, the family, the life I thought I had, it was all gone. But this time, when I held my son, no one could take him from me again.
It kind of makes you think how often things look completely normal from the outside, but there is something deeper no one questions. And what else might be happening like that right now?